Hey everyone, Laser Edition here with Karakondzhul. Welcome back.
Hello.
How's it going? You excited?
Yeah, I'm very excited to play this year again.
Anything you learned from last year that helped you prepare differently for this year?
I just am more calm now because I've already been through the process. Like last year, I was very excited. I had trouble sleeping in the night because I was so excited to play during the day. But yeah, this year I'm a bit more calm because I'm already used to it. I've already been through the process once.
I've been asking everyone, what's your favorite deck that you've brought to the tournament this year?
Oh, it has to be the Archer. I think this is a deck that surprised everyone. No one expected that anyone would bring Archer of any kind, even more so the Curse Archer. So yeah, I'm really excited that I managed to find something that, at least in my opinion, works. It's good in this meta. No one else really thought about. So yeah, I'm really happy that I get a chance to show off something like this.
Out of everyone who's here at the tournament, is there anyone you're particularly afraid of to match up against?
I don't know, like it's hard to say. I have to say that Thulier is a really good player, but there is also, I'm scared to face also like Super, I'm scared to face like Frenzy, I'm scared of all of them really. These people really put in an effort, and I think everyone brought really good decks, so I think it's gonna be fun matches anyway. So.
You're very well known for your deck construction style, having lots of ones and two ofs, saying, I'll draw it when I need it.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approach deck building and how these ones and two ofs and the $5,000 Anasi comes to happen?
Okay, so I think a lot of people value consistency too much. So they think that consistency comes from having 3 copies of a card. And for me, consistency isn't that much about the individual copies of a card that you play, but it's more about having a consistent curve. So having more 2 drops than 3 drops, for example, and then more 3 drops than 4 drops. So having like a curve that's going downhill. And I think people are too stuck on having 3 copies of a particular card. And I think there is a lot of value in having those flexible choices that sometimes they're really good, but sometimes they're just stuck in your hand and you can't really get value out of them. For example, something like Spinner. There are situations where Spinner is absolutely amazing. You can push for little, remove your Shackle, you can destroy their Breton for free. But if you have multiple Spinners in hand, if you've been in that situation, you know, you can't do anything with them.
Right.
It's just for Magica free too. So yeah, I think those are the choices that I like to go. That I think more people should be go as one-offs, like those flexible choices that tech against like your opponent in lineups.
One last question before we wrap up here. We are in a format where you're allowed to have one ban. You can choose one thing your opponent doesn't get to play, and they can do it right back at you.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular banning strategy coming into this? Do you expect something of yours to be banned away very frequently, maybe?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of people will be banning my Redoran. It's very aggressive strategy, and I think they recognize it's very aggressive, and it can get underneath pretty much everything. So I think people will be scared of that. As far as what I'll be banning, I think my bans will be, I feel like I'm fine against mid-range decks. I think I can beat most mid-range decks in my lineup, so I'm not going to be banning any mid-range decks. I think I have a decent chance against Control, as long as it's not Tribunal. I'm scared of Tribunal. If I see Tribunal, just ban it.
Sure.
Luckily, in my part of the bracket, there isn't many Tribunals. Like, it's just in the other part. So if I get to the final, you can know what to expect me to ban.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, I think I'll just try to ban the fastest deck that my opponent has.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This has been really good.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. This is Laser Edition here with Wita. How you doing?
Doing all right. I mean, it's pretty sweet being flown out here. Got the hotel. Got driven here by a driver, like a Lincoln, which is like a super nice car as well from the airport. That was sweet.
Having a good time so far?
Enjoying myself a lot, yeah.
I love it. So, first question I've been asking everyone, just because I think it's fun. It's a good starter one. Of your lineup, obviously you brought 4 lists. Do you have one that's your favorite?
I mean, Sorcerer's my baby, right? Like everyone who knows who I am knows that I've used so much time on this, spent so much time on it. Ever since the dawn of time of Legends, I have been synonymous with Sorcerer. So it's also a list that's very much just different from everything else in the tournament, I think.
So did you bring that just for comfort level? Do you think it's particularly well suited for the tournament? What's your thought process behind bringing that?
It's a comfort deck. I think there's often a lot of percentages to be won in events by playing decks that you're very familiar with and people may or may not know that well. Because I was watching some people test it and they mulliganed incorrectly, for example, and stuff. And I also think that it does well. In practice, it did what it's supposed to do.
Let's talk about ban strategies for a moment. The format allows for one ban from each player. You get to choose one deck that isn't played from your opponent, and they get to choose one you're not playing. Do you have anything on your list you're expecting to be banned very frequently? And do you have anything that you're looking to ban away more often than not?
I think that Gilsorn is the boogeyman of the entire tournament. I think that deck is super strong. I think that a lot of people would just ban that. I don't know if that necessarily is going to be away from me because people might be afraid of a different deck of mine. It really comes down to what strategy people are running, but I know that for very often I will be banning that away myself as well, I think.
Makes sense. Do you think that's the right call for other people to ban away?
It's just because the thing is that it's a deck that it can play pretty much all three strategies. I can go combo heavy, you set up the big rage, and it can do not that aggressive strategy, but it can do like a pretty good mid-range curve as well, which can contest a lot of things as well. So I think it's just a deck that's super versatile and can do a lot of things. So by banning that out, you open yourself up to target more specific decks. You allow yourself to get your Q order in this, which is also super important in a way you don't really have to take note for that deck.
Any lists you saw, I assume you've looked over the list a little bit at this point.
Yeah, of course.
Anything that you're looking at and saying, what's up with this one? How is that supposed to work?
Frenzy's Telvanni.
Oh yeah? Well, go into that a little bit for me.
It's an uprising deck, but it doesn't really have like it has a conscription as well, but the conscription is super weak. Like when you think about conscription Telvanni decks, you think about that as being, you know, you have this massive payoff turn with like golems, lethal, like the assassins coming down, and a lot of other 2-drops is really doing a lot of work there, but it doesn't really help that. It only draws you like 1 or 2 cards at most, which is a fairly weak card for 12 costs, and a lot of decks can contest that, but it's just weird because it also has the uprisings, which is also like a common inclusion, like something that a year ago was everywhere, uprising Telvanni and uprising Scout. Just put the OTK combos. It also has that combo in, and I know that like what it's supposed to do in a sense, but like having a playtest in it, it just doesn't really connect ever because there's no Atronox in there, Flesh Atronox in there, which is like the common card you use for just killing people and make sure you never break a room, because so you have a lot of 2-drops that go into your graveyard. But yeah, I know that card is like, that deck is just a little bit weird to me. And also I think that had Karakondzhul gone a little bit differently with his archer, like made it more, I think there's a lot of, like it's a very Karakondzhul deck in the sense that a lot of really random inclusions and exclusions and just 2-offs and 1-offs. I think that you could probably make that deck a little bit more consistent, but it's still, I know what it does, and I just wonder why we don't choose to not make it more consistent.
Welcome back, Elder Scrolls Legends fans. We are back for round 2 of the quarterfinals at the Masters Series between Wita and Karakondzhul. I want to hear a little bit from everyone about what we expect in this next matchup. But first, we have joining us known streamer, content creator, and hair bow enthusiast Silverfuse. How you doing?
I'm doing great today. How about you?
You know, I'm doing pretty all right. It's been a good day. So let's start with you because you haven't gotten a chance yet. If you're going to be looking out at this match a little bit, what is it that you're trying to keep an eye on between these two players?
Well, I would say between everyone, these two have brought the most interesting decks that are just a little bit different, not as traditional as we see. So seeing how those pay off for them, I think is really interesting.
Charmer, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the right thing to highlight, right? Wita here has brought Battle Mage, but it is an aggressive Battle Mage. I'm personally a fan, so I'm excited to see that in action. Also brought Sorcerer, only person to bring this style of deck as well. So it's going to be up to him to get the most out of the Sorcerer. And not only is it Sorcerer, but it's not a very aggressive one. It can be aggressive, but you see 3 Bone Colossus and a Nahagleave at the top end here. So this is not a very traditional Sorcerer. On the other side of things, when you start talking about Karakondzhul, the Archer list is very interesting. He said he was excited to bring it. Nobody else was really thinking along that vein. And his veteran list is very, very fast and dynamic. This is a very exciting series.
Jason, we were talking yesterday a little bit about Karakondzhul's Archer list, how it's very curse effect heavy, very stat reduction heavy, and how we think that that could actually line up very, very well against the field. Charmer in particular was talking a bit about that, but you had some thoughts of your own too.
Specifically, it lines up really good with the typical mid battle mage. Unfortunately, Wita chose a different form of the mid battle mage. So as we look at the archer from Karakondzhul, you'll see that it plays more like what you would think of an archer of a couple years ago in order to make tempo plays and play the removal game in a way that you don't necessarily see out of the other mids in today's format.
Yeah, Karakondzhul also, if I'm not mistaken, the only player to bring one of those housed Redoran decks. Silver, what is this deck aiming to do, and how does it try to accomplish that?
As you said in the interview, it's a very fast, aggressive deck, looking to get under some of these more mid-rangey style decks. So he brought that as being one of the aggressive lines along with the Crusader.
Yeah, I think that's probably exactly what he was thinking too. Charmer, we were hearing from the interview process how Karakondzhul is a big fan of reducing consistency just a little bit, because you think it's a little bit overrated in order to have more answers for more situations. Like you were saying earlier, give himself an out in every situation. Are there any of those little inclusions that you've seen while we're looking at the decks that you really want to highlight that you think are particularly interesting?
Specifically in the Archer list, he's running like the Dushnik Archer. And we know that there's a couple of go-wide decks in the format, so being able to be flexible enough to destroy supports and then also put a guard on the field is kind of a big deal. It's not normally a card that you include in a proactive lineup, but again, just kind of giving himself that flexibility where there are times when that card is amazing, and there are times when it kind of gums up your hand, but just as a one-of silver bullet, if I do draw it at the time it's amazing, it can completely flip a game around. So that's one of the ones that really stood out to me.
And really, from the Wita side, looking into the Guildsworn, looking at a choice of a card that you're not going to see a whole lot of otherwise with Seducer Darkfire. So really looking to see, it's a card that requires a lot of choice and a lot of understanding what the matchup and the gameplay and predicting. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out for Wita and his playtest partner, Boons, who's also playing it in some of his lists.
Yeah, that's true. Boom's Life and Wita did playtest all their decks together coming into this, as a lot of players tended to do. They have friends, they have teammates helping them out, trying to figure out exactly what the list should look like. What I want to know is we have 2 signature deck lists. We have the Sorcerer and we have the Archer that both of these players are very, very proud of. Which of these ones do you think, Silver, has an edge if those decks are going to end up going head-to-head?
Ooh. I think I'm going to have to go with the Archer just because of the amount of just things it can do. They both have a little bit different flavors to them, so I would say I'd go for the Archer. I like the Leaf Lurker combo in it quite a bit, and being able to get rid of some of those mid-range tools that the Sorcerer has, I think it's important.
Well, there we go. That is one prediction out of the way. The players are just about ready to get on stage, so let's go check out some of those fancy intros that we have for these two. We're going to see exactly what these two are all about as they come on stage right about now. So something we just saw Wita do that I think is particularly interesting. He had a stack of paper in his hand that he decided to put down next to his computer with him. If you're on stage, these deck lists that you have from your opponents can be very, very important. Do you guys want to talk to me a little bit about how having access to an open deck list format can influence how you're going to be playing throughout the series?
Sure, I'll jump right in there. I think that this is actually why I like Karakondzhul's deck building. Because when you have access to your opponent's deck, you're kind of keeping track of what they've played and what they might have in hand. And the strength of having a lot of 1 and 2-ofs means that as an opponent, as a player, I have to plan around every one of those options.
But do you? Jason, is there any merit in choosing to not play around any of them instead?
Absolutely. Sometimes you just need to focus on what your deck does well, because trying to plan for everything, sometimes nothing will work out for you in the end.
Well, it turns out we have the deck bans are locked in now. We're going to take a look at that. Wita is not going to be playing that House Dagoth deck in Karakondzhul. No battle mage for him. What do we think here? Silverfuse, any thoughts on these bans?
In some ways, a little bit surprised not to see the Redoran ban, just because, as Karakondzhul was saying, it is one of his faster decks to get under these more, I guess we have the more mid-range, some control, a little bit of a mix. And I do think just the strength of Alfiq, though, I can see why you would ban it.
Charmer, agree, disagree?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that Redoran wasn't banned as well. I am not shocked at all by Karakondzhul's banning of getting rid of the House Dagoth, because again, that's a deck that can fight for the board, but also does stabilize. He said during the interview he's okay against control, so I think this is the right ban.
Well, it sounds like the players are nearly ready. Time again to ask you guys the hardest question a host can possibly ask. Predictions. Who is going to win Silverfuse? Let's start with you.
Karakondzhul getting second at last year's Masters, just been a solid performer, and I expect him to do well, so I have to favor with Karakondzhul for this match.
One for Kara. Charmer.
I absolutely love Wita. He's my boy. He's my fellow caster, but I think Karakondzhul takes the series.
2 for Kara.
Especially after seeing the Redoran make it through, I could totally see Karakon taking it, and that's what my prediction's at.
All right, 3-0 for Karakondzhul in this series versus Wita. Casters, doing Wita dirty, but you know what? Sometimes we just gotta call it that way. I think we are just about ready to get into the game. Are there any last words that you guys want to get in before we head into this? Anything viewers at home should be looking out for?
Specifically for me, I think you need to keep an eye on Murkwater's Scourge when the Archer list comes up. That is a really powerful card against aggressive deck lists, and that is something Karakondzhul is running a 3 of. Specifically against Sorcerer that's ward heavy, I think that's going to be a card to watch.
I would keep an eye out for the Battle Mage. In his pre-interviews, Kara talked about being a little nervous about the aggro decks, and that Battle Mage is pretty aggressive, so we'll see whether or not that pays off for Wita.
Silver, any last thoughts?
I mean, not too much more. I'm really interested to see the Sorcerer and the Archer. Maybe we do get to see them against each other.
How about this? What do we think about for first decks to queue?
Ooh, that is a tough call. I think if I'm Karakondzhul, I just load up Redoran and show you why you should have banned it. If I'm Wita, I think maybe you start with a Comfort deck. Maybe you start with Sorcerer.
I think what I don't start with is I don't start with a Guildsworn, and I hold that one back for the possibility of maybe if you go down in the series, being able to pull out a reversal, a sweep with the Guildsworn.
Yeah, I agree with holding back the Guildsworn, seeing what's played first. Maybe go with the Comfort pick Sorcerer just because Wita's so comfortable with that deck overall. And I think Karakon, you're right. You just say, you should have banned this Redoran. I'm going to 3-0 you with it.
Yeah, very fair. How about key cards in these matchups? You highlighted the Murkwater Scourge. I think that is dead on. I think that is one that has a lot of potential to swing this matchup, get that stat reduction in. Jason, do you have any ideas for cards you really want to keep an eye on in this matchup?
Especially for that Redoran, I would keep an eye out for that Apprentice Necromancer. Karakon is playing a lot of one costs, so the value that you're going to see early and often from those Apprentice Necromancers is going to be a key part of play.
Well, and I like that point right there, that he's running a lot of those one-drops. Charmer, you've gone on, I don't want to call it record, but the internet, and said that you think people should be running more one-drops. How do you feel about one-drop saturation in this tournament these days?
I mean, we're seeing a bit more. Some more powerful one-drops have been printed as of late, so they're certainly more prevalent. But with the introduction of cards like Apprentice Necromancer, I've been, if you've been paying attention, and nobody ever does to me, but I've been thumping both Necromancers very hard lately because you can create this kind of toolbox scenario. And I think Karakondzhul's Redoran is the great deck for demonstrating exactly that.
Well, and I think that's something we saw in the last round with the Apprentice Necromancer being able to bring back the Deepwood Trappers. You'd be able to get exactly the cards you need at the time you need it. Silver, do you think there's anything that you're particularly looking to bring back out of the 1 costs? What of those are going to be the most impactful, do you think?
I really like bringing back Mudcrab for resource extension is really important, and then Marked Man just being able to go wide, especially if you have something like Fervor or the Mercenary Captain out. It's just a lot of stats that you can pull back all of a sudden.
So something that you and I talked about when we were casting the Last Chance qualifier is that Mudcrab Merchant can be a double-edged sword. Sure, you're getting yourself resources, but you're also giving your opponent resources. And sometimes that can be strictly a wrong choice. Jason, how do you think resource management, with the way these decks line up each other, do you think that's going to be something that's particularly impactful, or do you think it's going to be, all right, I attack, now you stabilize, now I lose, now I win?
Certainly it'll be matchup dependent, but I would expect that Karakondzhul is a master of being able to bleed every single drop out of his resources. So I would expect that that will be really important for that matchup, but I would imagine that several of the matchups, all the decks are going to be playing the different archetypes of whether mid or aggro, and we're going to see a lot of flexibility in these choices as it's a resource battle starting turn 1.
Yeah, so you can see we have a small issue on stage that we're looking to go over, but that just means we can rely on your brilliant analysis for a little bit longer. So one thing I want to talk about that I think we haven't talked about much is the card choices that you were highlighting when we took a look at Wita's Sorcerer deck. Has a lot of big butts that you can throw on the ground and say, you know what, here's something big, you can't deal with the 34th and 35th of them. Things like Preserver of the Root as inclusions that we saw way back in the day that really aren't being played a lot anymore. How do you think that those larger threats, those kind of slower but beefier threats, might influence the way that deck gets played?
Well, so for me personally, I think it's going to be really interesting because that deck lines up, I think, very well against slower decks. I think that it's great against control. I think it's pretty solid even against other mid-range battle mage decks because cards like Bone Colossus can flood the board. You don't have great ways to deal with it. But against these aggressive lists, I think Kara is going to come underneath them all.
And we will see if that is the case. We are ready to get into match number 2 between Karakondzhul and Wita. Casters, wish you all of the luck, and let's get into this game.
And it looks like we're jumping immediately in. Players have mulliganed, so Wita has started with Dagoth and Karakondzhul. Believe that is the Crusader list, and leads off with a Relentless Raider.
And this Crusader list is what you would typically refer to as kind of a Math Crusader version, which sometimes waits and wins all at once, but with an opening play of the Raider into the 4-1 Ambusher, looking to take the aggressive stance early.
Yeah, this is a breakneck start for Karakondzhul.
And playing on the back foot, the 4-cost Enraged Dragonite may not be what you want, as well as the slightly undersized Manic Jack.
Yeah, this hand here is very awkward for Wita. As we saw, he had to ring out the Manic Jack, didn't find a 2-drop earlier, and just looking at this hand, there's very limited options. Really looking for this Cradle Crush Giant during the future could be a really big payoff for Wita.
Yeah, Karakondzhul has an interesting decision to make here because if he wants to try to maximize the value he gets out of this Relentless Raider, he has a number of charge creatures in hand. He could just push them all face to guarantee you get a second Rune Break trigger. This is my kind of deck. If you know anything about me, you know that I love creatures that have the word charge on them, and we are staring at an awful lot of charge creatures available to Karakondzhul.
And you can see with that attack of the Vanguard that Karakondzhul has decided about the value line instead of pushing the Raider, breaking the rune, getting the extra damage out of it.
Yeah, this is a nice, safe, conservative play. I kind of wish that he would have read that Wita has a poor hand based on some of the plays that he's had and just tried to punish him for it, but you can't go wrong with being conservative, and in a big tournament like this, there's comfort in, being methodical with your choices, right?
Orders.
Yeah, knowing from the Vanguard that he would have an on-tempo play the next turn makes it even better, knowing that he has this 4-mana 5/5 waiting for him.
Really gave him an opportunity to play a low-tempo Vanguard into a high-tempo 5/5 4 on this turn.
All right, now that's very interesting by Wita there because he did choose to take the Consume, which hurts his opponent, but also hurts himself. And right now he's kind of behind on life totals, and that is a cancelable effect. So if Wita wanted, he could have instead canceled there, just developed the 5-4 body, and not done the damage to himself.
Yeah, I think every time there, personally, I would cancel it because at this point, he is not the aggressor. He is the mid-range deck. He wants to be able to survive, find the hand of Dagoth, heal up. He doesn't want to do more damage to himself, and really putting your opponent at 28 doesn't really help you all that much.
Now, Wita is getting a Prophecy Lightning Bolt here, but not enough to kill the 5-5 on its own. But you don't want to throw it face necessarily either, because you don't want to break the rune.
It's going to pair well with that Cradle Crush on the following turn to be able to finish off the 5-1.
And Karakondzhul reads that very wisely and says, if you're doing that, you're not trading with the 5-4, you have some other trick, so I'm going to pivot now to the Shadow Lane.
And Wita at 8 health already, with Karakon with a bunch of reach in hand. We're looking at the difficulty of keeping your life total high with the Elfiq.
Now, that Elfiq does increase our counter for the day, but it is, again, just a 3-4 guard in this scenario. The other body is kind of irrelevant. It does nothing for you defensively, and again, if you're one of those players at home who've maybe been struggling against Elfiq Conjurer, this is the way you attack these decks. You get underneath them so that the additional stats created by the card just simply do not matter.
Looking at a situation, too, where Karakon drawing the outpost now has the ability to potentially have 6 points of burst on the following turn.
Yeah, I like that plan. I think that you take the raiding party, but you keep them in hand does exactly that, because on the following turn you can play Outpost, the Stormcloak, and the 2 Nords from hand, and there is absolutely nothing Wita can do to stop it at this point. Even if he hits a Prophecy, it won't stop the additional cards because of the sequencing. So this is going to be a victory for Karakondzhul, and a very impressive victory at that. Karakondzhul winning in Karakondzhul fashion, right? Quickly, efficiently.
Yes.
Both players were playing fast there too. Not a lot of pauses in their decision making. On Wita's side, part of that I think is just due to the fact that he didn't have many options. But Karakondzhul, you can tell he's put in the time. He was not thinking about plays. He knew exactly what to do every turn.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to him yesterday, and he was talking about potentially regretting bringing that Crusader, which I was surprised to hear him say that just because he's just been so efficient on those aggressive style decks. So he's kind of second-guessing himself yesterday, but after that one, he's got to be feeling pretty good.
And well, he gets to play it again, because this is the last class standing format, so you play with a deck until it loses, and Wita now cannot play Dagoth, has a couple of decks left in his stable. Do you think he goes to the Sorcerer now? Goes to that comfort deck?
I think so. I think that at this point you kind of want to settle things down. You played a mid deck and you drew the wrong half when you needed to draw the control tools. So the Sorcerer with the consistent 2-cost package, I would expect that that's where I would go next.
I think most likely the Sorcerer here. I could make the argument for the Guildsworn too, just hoping that you do find the right part of your deck as well. But I think going on a comfort pick, trying to get on a win is something that you know that you can play well, and you know what to expect from Karakon now.
Yeah, and I want to actually quote Jason earlier, who said that saving Guildsworn for the end for potential like reverse sweep options, just because it is the kind of deck that can beat any other ones. You have to get the right cards at the right time, obviously, but it certainly has a game plan in every scenario. I think saving that for the end also makes an awful lot of sense. And it looks like the players are still waiting to get in here. Maybe a minor technical issue. So as we wait for them to jump in, what do you think? What do you think Wita has to do, right, to kind of get himself back into this? Because you lost so quickly and emphatically. Like, that's got to be a bit of a mental challenge, right?
Exactly. You really want to just put your best foot forward in this next game, settle things down, slow it down, try to play a game where you're not immediately against the wall, and see how you can go from there, one game at a time.
Yeah, starting with a hand that you didn't really have too many options to work with is always a little bit disheartening to start the tournament, but just being able to brush that game aside and focus on the next one, because that's the one that matters. Other games don't matter anymore.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, I think that you're probably not feeling very great, not just because you lost, but also because you felt like Dagos would have been a good matchup if you drew the right half of your deck, and now that's out of your lineup. So looks like we are getting into the game, and it's already a little bit in progress. But Wita has decided to go with the Guildsworn control and has some very quality control options in his hand.
You can see two non-standard options, the Apex Wolf and the Seducer Darkfire, looking for some really interesting top end, and with the Ring being able to threaten the field lane a little easier, and the Skaven may clean up that 6-1.
Yeah, no hesitation there as we see the Skaven destroy 6 attack and then leave a 4-1 as well. It's pretty much the ideal scenario for Wita there.
The Magicka, the way that this is going to go out, with being able to play the Hive Defender and then on future turns being able to ring out the Apex into the Seducer, will give you an opportunity to really contest.
Now, Karakondzhul develops that Brawler there because not only does it attack the turn it comes into play, but it has a lot of health and guard. So it's going to protect that 4-1 for at least a turn, allowing you to continue to pressure. However, Wita's answer with this Hive Defender, this dapper defender wearing that suit with that amazing goblet, is really going to slow things down in that field lane, and Karakondzhul recognizes that and is pivoting to the shadow.
Karakon probably disappointed that he spent his 5th turn playing only 3 Magicka in the Mighty Ally, with his 4 cost being a little tricky one in the Shrewd Strategist. Typically good with drawing a lot of Nords.
Oh, that top deck has got to make Karakondzhul second guess his play here, because you've got to be tempted to consider hitting this wolf, denying the drain, denying the card draw, and he does exactly that.
I think denying that drain when he's a very fast-paced deck, and he only has 2 cards left in his hand right now, so resources are limited. So I think taking away that drain and the card draw into more drain is a fantastic thing for Karakondzhul here.
And Wita taking some trades, but also wants to draw additional cards because the ones that he had were simply not enough. And looking to develop something here. Pretty much every one of the plays is a little clunky. Viper Brigand can develop in the shadow, but Madman's going to grow the following turn, so it's not a straight trade. You could develop Ravenous Hunger, but unless you're developing it in the lane with the Madman, it's not going to gain drain, and if they answer it, then you're reducing your chances of stabilizing. So it does go with that option, but it's a bit clunky in its execution.
And in an ideal situation, the 4 attack from the Ravenous Hunger will match up well with the Madman. But that Madman continues to grow, and the Outpost is going to continue to put pressure.
I'm gonna get them first.
So the Outpost comes down, the Madman attacks, but Karakondzhul is in a bit of a pickle here, and it's going to get even worse with this Cloud Rest Illusionist Prophecy, but in a bit of a pickle because you do not have a good way to deal with the Ravenous Hunger. So Wita is going to get some health back, start to stabilize.
And playing the body of the Cloud Rush Illusionist into the shadow gives you an opportunity to play the deck's namesake on a Drain creature.
Watch yourself.
Yeah, you have that option. Interestingly enough, instead, goes with the Lord Crafter here so that you can drain some health away, keep it alive, and I like that sequencing there.
Yeah, pretty straightforward for Wita right now. Just trying to stabilize this last bit. Has a few resources to do so.
This is really the ideal situation for Rage. Your opponent has played into the shadow lane because the field lane is controlled, and now we have Rage potential on a Drain creature that's going to trigger any time.
Yeah, I think that you almost have to take the Rage here. You don't clear everything. The 6/5 will survive with 1 health, but you're going to gain so much health in return while clearing up everything else that you set yourself very well for future turns, right? You can finish off that 6/5 with the Rapid Shot. Interesting. Wow. Wita decides to break a rune here. Give Karakondzhul more resources.
Actually seeing that if there was a prophecy and if it was played in the shadow, it would just be a little bit of extra value from the strain, and looking to set up the, well, not quite the 2-turn here, but just putting on the pressure, which I think is a little bit scary. Although at 34 health, just being able to develop a wide board with a lot of burst is probably ideal for Karakondzhul here.
Often this deck, this form of Crusader is referred to as Math Crusader, but that life total is really high. I don't think the math is going to add up that quickly.
Yeah, Garnag coming down is a very big deal, though. If you're not familiar, Garnag reduces the magicka of both players to 7 as a maximum, so it limits what Wita can do on his turn.
This is an interesting choice for Wita, an opportunity to play the Seducer Darkfire, choose a cost, and Karakondzhul cannot play that cost. So if he chooses right, we might see Karakon's hand locked out.
And 3 is a fantastic call. The reason you want to pick something like 3 is because it's going to lock out cards like Raiding Party, and even more specifically, something like Crusader's Assault that would enable Karakondzhul to draw more cards. I like that choice.
This Brawler coming down is a little bit of just a block here for Wita, only having 7 magicka, very limited on what he can do. Karakondzhul's developed a very scary board here in 2 turns.
With the restriction that we're seeing from the Garnag, Wita only has 7 magicka to spend, so you can't play all the good goodies.
So Garnag is a unique legendary. You are forced by the rules of the game to only include it as a one-of, but I have to be chuckling at Karakondzhul getting a lot of mileage out of a card that he only has 1 copy of in his deck.
But we see value off of the Archer being able to remove the support. Going into this, we were wondering which targets the Archer would hit. He found one. Hit his mark.
We did find it. Now, Wita has set himself up so that he can potentially win this game with just attacking. He's got Karakondzhul down to 6 health himself. So Kara here either needs to find a way to deal 10 damage or stabilize by pulling some of these bodies off the board.
So with the breakthrough and a Divine Fervor, you're pushing a lot of damage here.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, with the Divine Fervor, unless you hit a Prophecy, you do actually have, I believe, lethal here, because you're going to have the Stormcloak and the Nord represent 4. The House Carl itself would represent 4, and then with the Fervor, you would have 2 breakthrough coming through over the Archer. So this is the line. You just have to not hit a Prophecy. He does not, and he's going to end up taking this victory. So extremely well piloted by Karakondzhul there, picking up a 2-0 lead in the series.
Yeah, going back to that, I feel like taking the aggressive line there as Wita ended up being a mistake. As we know, I was talking about the burstiness of this deck is insane, and just giving it the outs. I feel like if he would have played it Jason style and just would have not attacked for a few turns, got a little bit more stabilization, maybe got a little bit too comfortable hitting 34 health, and then realizing, wow, that was a lot of damage with a few cards.
Yeah, hitting the 34 health I think was the right play, but as you said, when you break runes and you give the aggro player resources, they're gonna punish you. That health total isn't, you don't win the game by being alive, right? You have to also find ways to close it, and you want to do it all in one turn traditionally as control. Wita was taking the more turn-by-turn approach, gave Karakondzhul resources to get back into the game, and it just didn't work out.
And Wita really looked for a line where that Seducer Darkfire was going to end it quick. It's a large body, 7 cost, gives you some options, but then that Brawler came down and really put a stop to the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Brawler. It is a great card in these red aggressive lists because it does exactly that. It can attack, but the guard and the high health means you can protect the other threats that you have developed, and that is huge, and we saw it pay off as a result.
Yes, I've also been a very big fan of Brawler. Just the versatility of it, charge and guard, what more can you ask for as an aggro player?
More charge, as far as I'm concerned. Give me more cards that have charge on it. And we are now finally going to see Wita on his trademark sorcerer list. We are in game 3 here. And he's going to need a reverse sweep if he wants to move on.
And what better to do it with potentially his favorite deck? I would assume it is, considering it's most played.
And the play is dictated immediately by Karakon playing into the shadow, saying, I know that you have small to the ground ward creatures and you're going to win the field lane, so I'm going to avoid that entirely.
Yeah, you don't want to run into that Windsweep Spell Sword. You don't want to run into future Daggerfall Mages, Ward Crafters, etc. And in fact, this Ward Crafter here is likely going to pay off well, and instead, no, doesn't want to save it. Wants to develop a Troll, and that is a big Troll.
hits the right target here, being able to trade with us in the future favorably is really important. If it would have hit the field lane, it just would have been trapped there and to an extent kind of useless.
This Relentless Raider top deck is such a good development because you're going to get so much value out of it this turn if you want. You're going to see the Firebrand come down as well, so that is essentially 3 extra damage for 1 Magicka that Karakondzhul top decks that turn.
That wide board really prevents the Sorcerer from doing what it does best. So now Wita has to choose and can't handle all of the threats in the shadow.
Yeah, really, Karakondzhul just kind of having the dream aggressive start here. Even off ring was just able to go 2, 3, get the procs, and as well as this setup here is extremely well, finding his reach, getting the Divine Fervor. It is just a very, very strong board for him.
And barring Prophecy, Karakondzhul is going to be able to put Wita at a very low life total, within reach of being able to raiding party the following turn if he decides to fervor this turn.
Yeah, so right now, Divine Fervor would potentially put Wita down to 2. Now, Wita has an answer for the Fervor with Shadow Fen, but Raiding Party, even without a Fervor, would be enough to finish it. Instead, Wita hits this huge Prophecy. That denied 4 extra damage.
And denies the potential reach the following turn.
Yeah, this is a very, very important play.
It really came off of the right room, too. You wanted that RP to immediately stop it because you were going to deal with those creatures anyway. Now, you have a tough decision on whether or not you want to pivot.
Well, last game you made the mistake and gave him cards. Can you afford to do it this time? Decides he does want to attack, but all of a sudden, Karakondzhul has an awful lot of creatures with charge in hand again.
The potential of 4 of 6 from reach from Karakon, so not quite enough. So looking to develop the Madman potentially to make sure that the next turn is the turn that could end it.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because Karakondzhul cannot win this turn. He has to try to set up for next turn. But he's going to need some help because Wita here with the Haunting Spirit, if he plays Haunting Spirit and then immediately sacrifices it, yeah, I was going to say he would have had lethal on the board. So Karakondzhul rightly identifies, hey, I'm in danger. I don't like to trade as the aggressive player, but this is the right line.
And Wita, you really have to consider here of taking a turn off. But you know that you can't deal with the Madman. Don't want to give additional tools to Karakon, hoping that he draws dead.
Karakondzhul not finding the top deck lethal that he is famously known for.
Yeah, he was very, very close. He needed exactly 1 damage. Wita here, again, not finding additional damage himself, but has the option to sacrifice the Haunting Spirit still, so this is going to be close.
It looks like it may come down to where that last gas target goes.
Yeah, the percentages are certainly going to favor Wita, but the last gasp can land on the creature that replaces the Haunting Spirit, so this is it. We're going to see whether or not it lands. It's going to be a 4 out of 6 chance to give you
and
a
it does.
victory, and it does. So barring a prophecy here, Karakondzhul will suffer his first loss, but we have a prophecy. Is it the defensive kind? It is. Turns out sometimes top decking isn't enough. Prophecies are also Karakondzhul's specialty.
And Wita having no defense against the Shadow Lane now, that is going to be it. He has no other options here.
What a key prophecy.
Wow. Had the game within his grasp, played it correctly. Karakondzhul is your victor.
You really feel for Wita putting himself in the situation to potentially win it and hoping to play the percentages, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, you've got to feel for him. You've got to feel for him because that is not the way that you expected it going in your mind.
Well, that is going to be 3-0 for Karakondzhul off of that Crusader list. Talk to me a little bit about that Crusader Seducer Darkfire play in the second game out of Wita. I'm curious, what do you think he was targeting with the 3-cost ban off that card?
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit during the cast. Raiding Party is something that you're worried about because it can provide burst, but Crusader's Assault is also a concern because you were trying to keep Karakondzhul kind of low on resources, and so taking away one of your better card draw options and reach, because that also represents 2 extra damage, is a really big deal.
And the outpost, you could imagine with a support-heavy reach, that the outpost and all of the potential charged creatures that could go with it, there's several hits.
That makes sense to me. We're seeing a couple highlights here. Karakondzhul being able to get out to just such fast starts with such fast decks, being able to take this series really well. Is there anything that you think Wita could have done maybe a little differently in deck construction? Any piloting that you noticed that maybe could have been slightly different? Or do you think it was just strictly a good matchup for Karakondzhul?
For me personally, the only thing that stood out was, again, when he started attacking with his Guildsworn. So you take the rage, you gain all the health, you've got a lot of cards. Karakondzhul didn't have many in hand. I can understand wanting to put a clock on him and capitalize on that, but you know, Jason here is kind of known for saying, I like to get in situations where the only way I lose is by attacking, and I think that one might have been the case, but that's the only one that really stands out to me.
So, Charmer, how close to time to fight was that Crusader deck?
It's very, very close. It's actually, so when I built the Crusader version, that was actually the original version of Time to Fight. It was titled Ray Chargels at the time. And
oh my God, Charmer.
It's very, very close to that because, again, you capitalize on having creatures with charge that can deal damage and get you immediate value. Legends right now in the meta is all about immediate value, and usually players get that through summon effects. Charge is another way to do that. So you're guaranteeing you get damage, and then even if they trade, even if they answer your creatures, you've already got value out of them. You've advanced the clock of the game. So I'm a big fan of it. I love the deck. I love seeing creatures with charge. Yeah, it's...
Yeah, and in addition to that, you can really see how Karakon knew the matchup. He went Shadow Lane, and he went it a lot. He stacked it, and from that, that Sorcerer had no choice but feel the life total like go down every turn. Really, no other playouts there.
Well, let's hear from the man himself, Karakondzhul. Congratulations on your 3-0.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to answer me honestly. How many copies of Green Pact Ambusher are you running in that Crusader list?
There are 3 of them.
There are 3 of them?
Yeah.
So that's not a Karakondzhulism.
No, there are a lot of Karakondzhulisms in the deck, but that's not one of
I'm
them.
going to make that phrase canon by the end of the day. I hope you know that. So how does it feel taking a 3-0? Does that momentum feel good taking you to the next round?
Yeah, I had kind of given up in the second game.
No, I don't have it with me.
It looked like he's
It's on my
very
phone back
ahead.
there.
But then I was managed to turn it back somehow. So yeah, that felt amazing. I can feel for Wita because he felt that his game like slipped from his fingers. So I can see that he was a bit tilted in the third game. But he's still a really good player, and I think he showed that in the first 2 games.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think were you counting on your Crusader list to do what it did, or did you think you had fallback plans as well?
Actually, no, I didn't expect it. I thought, okay, so this is a deck that kind of does similar things against all of his lineups, so I'm going to open with this. If it wins a game, good. If it doesn't, then I know what to play next. And then it went to 3-0, and yeah, I feel really regret about that.
Yeah, and this buff-based, charge-based kind of Crusader is a deck we've seen you play a whole lot through the years of
qualifiers,
your tournament play. Is that just a deck you're super comfortable on? Did you think it was particularly well suited for this tournament? What brought you to bring that deck?
The thing I like about this deck is that it's really, really fast, especially with the Mighty Alice. It can get under anything. So it's a way to punish those mid-range lineups that try to take against control. So I think for such a format like last class standing, it's an amazing deck to bring. I think we really need such aggressive decks. Also, it doesn't lose to control all the time. Like it's not a super favored matchup, but it's not super unfavored either. So yeah, I think it's a very strategic deck. I think it works really well in the format, and I've played it in all the qualifiers. I tried it in the new expansion. It was pretty much the same great deck, but there is shoot strategist now in it. So yeah, I think it does really well.
Makes sense to me. Jason, Charmer, anything for our guest Karakondzhul while we got him?
How do you feel about having to go up against Thuldir next round?
Oh, not great, but I'm really glad that I get to face him. So yeah, I hope you get to enjoy like a great series from both of us.
Are there any matchups specifically that you're looking forward to in that match?
I'm really forward to looking to playing Still Your Own Aggro. I don't think I've ever had the chance to do that, so this is be a first for me.
Yeah, that's what I want to know, because that's going to be a heavyweight fight next round. I'm excited to see that.
Oh man, I can't wait. Well, thank you very much, Karakondzhul, for letting us talk to you for a little bit. We are going to go to a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We have more Legends action coming up. You know where to find it. You know what you want to watch. Stick around.